my father realized that he could not do anything for me. So he learned through my aunt about a Christian orphanage called Holt. And so he took me there in hopes that I would have a better chance in life. And so I was literally abandoned at the orphanage when I was 5 years old. And I still vividly remember my father telling me to cry and somebody will come get you. And I did. I cried. And sure enough, somebody got me. And then I would crawl back the next day to where he dropped me off, thinking he was going to come get me. And so I did. And then I crawled back again and crawled back. And I did that number of times. And then I start thinking, did I do something wrong that I would be abandoned at a orphanage where I didn't know anybody?
Hello, sweet friends. I'm Stephanie Jacobs, a storyteller and advocate for social justice, and your host of the Love Light Stories podcast, a place where we uncover a deeper understanding of humanity through beautiful, redemptive stories that inspire our hearts. If you long to see more love, empathy, and true connection in our world and your own life, you're in the right place. After spending multiple years studying social justice issues, I've realized the power story has in helping us to understand, empathize, and transform our worldviews into something that's just that, views that are truly worldly. Here in this space, we'll embrace our humanity through raw and authentic stories told by real people themselves. We'll amplify their voices and learn to connect in more meaningful ways. Poverty, human trafficking, incarceration, race, immigration, and more. We'll embrace difficult conversations, sometimes controversial topics, and lighthearted stories too. If you wish to uncover the hope, love, empathy, and connection we can find in our fellow humanity, this is a show for you. So, are you ready, lovely? Let's jump in. Well, hello there, lovely. Welcome back to the Love Light Stories podcast, where we create space for real personal stories to be seen, heard, and understood. If you haven't yet, be sure to rate the show, follow, and share it with your family and friends. Today on the podcast, I'm welcoming Steve Stirling. In this episode, you'll learn how Steve, who was stricken by polio and orphaned at a young age, has been able to live a thriving life in America and ultimately serve those with needs that are similar to the needs of his own as a young boy in Korea so many years ago. Today, Steve is president and CEO of MAP International, a kingdom assignment God has so evidently and uniquely prepared him for through his own life experiences. As you'll listen, you'll come to understand those experiences through his inspiring story of overcoming immense difficulties to ultimately serving the world with life-saving medicines. I met Steve multiple years ago already and have had the chance to interact with him and others from MAP on multiple occasions, including vision summits, galas, donor meetings, and more. His story is truly unique and God-ordained, and MAP is one of my absolute favorite organizations. You'll come to know why as you listen in. Oh, and sorry about the slight hissing sound in his audio. We just weren't able to take that out. Now, here's my conversation with Steve. Steve, thank you so much for joining me on the Love Light Stories podcast today. It is truly just an honor and a pleasure to have you share your story today with everyone. I've known you for a good while, and you are the main guy at MAP International, and so we're going to dig into that later. But first, I want to start with your story because there's so much that we have to unpack here. So can you just help us understand where your story began?
Sure. And thank you, Stephanie, for having me on your Love Light podcast. So just a privilege to be included. Well, my story goes back many, many years into South Korea. And when I was 1 year old, I ended up getting polio. And my father had gone to a friend's child had passed away and went to the funeral. But unbeknownst to him, he later found out the child had passed away from polio. And so he then brought the virus to me. And when I was one, I ended up getting polio. I lived with my biological family for 5 years, and then my father realized that he could not do anything for me. So he learned through my aunt about a Christian orphanage called Holt. And so he took me there in hopes that I would have a better chance in life. And so I was literally abandoned at
Hmm.
the orphanage when I was 5 years old. And I still vividly remember my father telling me to cry and somebody will come get you. And I did. I cried. And sure enough, somebody got me. And then I would crawl back the next day to where he dropped me off, thinking he was going to come get me. And
Hmm.
so I did. And then I crawled back again and crawled back. And I did that number of times. And then I start thinking, did I do something wrong that I would be abandoned at a orphanage where I didn't know anybody? And then about 2 weeks later, my relatives brought my biological sister.
Hmm.
She's not disabled, and she's a couple of years younger than me, so at least we could be together. And so the orphanage accepted her as well. So at least then we had each other in the orphanage.
Wow. Do you know why they had dropped off your sister too?
Well, by the way, we found my biological family in 1991. So we heard the backstory, but they dropped her off as well because they wanted her to look after me. She was only 3 years old, I was five, but at least we could be together. And
Okay.
so they just said, well, maybe we can at least have each other in the orphanage. And thank God because we were adopted by the same American family. And that's a amazing story in and of itself.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, what a difficult situation for your family, your parents to have to do, your father, and then for you to be alone at that orphanage. And like you said, at least you had her, which is a bright spot in many ways. In your book, which by the way is called The Crutch of Success, I have read it. I actually found myself as I was preparing for this interview reading it again and I was like, I don't have time to keep reading, but it was so good. It captivated me. So it's incredible. I would encourage everyone to go read it. But in your book, you mentioned that you were unadoptable in many ways, and that really touched my heart because for a young child to feel that way is sad. And so I want to know why you said that.
At the time, by the time my parents came, and this is an amazing story too, and I'll share you the story there. But since I was disabled and I was an older child,
Hmm.
at the time when my parents came. Korea was 8 years old, and I was a sibling, had a younger sibling. So those are really being handicapped, having a sibling, and having being an older child. Those are very very difficult situation to be adopted. Usually, when people adopt, they want younger infant, baby, healthy child. And so, if you're older, you have a disability, and you come in a sibling, those are very hard to be adopted. And it's an amazing story because of the act of kindness my sister showed, which enabled us to get adopted. My parents they flew to Korea in 1964 to pick up another pair of siblings, not related to us biologically, but they were passing that candy to the kids that were left behind. And my sister, Mary Ellen, she was there, and she took the candy and she ran off. So my parents
Hmm.
asked the orphanage worker, "Doesn't she like us? Why is she running off that way?" And they said, "No, she has a handicapped brother, and she's taking in candy first." So I trained her really well. She was my leg, but because they were so touched by her kindness, they said, "Well, we need to meet her brother." So they took them back to the back of the orphanage where the handicapped kids were kept out of sight, out of mind. And they saw me playing on the ground and saw my smile. They said, "Oh, we need to adopt them too." And at that time, they had an immigration law. They could only bring over two children from a developing country, and they already
Hmm.
had two. So my parents took the initiative to contact the congressman, wrote letters, made phone calls, and it took 2 years. But
Wow.
a writer on a bill was attached to a bill that President Johnson signed in 1966. And when he signed that bill, we were part of that as a writer when that bill passed, and we came over in August of 1966.
Wow, what a big influence your parents had in getting that bill passed. That's incredible. And what a blessing. Their kind hearts must be so kind to come over, be adopting two children, and leave that day saying, we're going to adopt you too. It's just
Yeah.
incredible.
I remember the hope I had because they said, and I was 8 years old at the time, so I was old enough to know. And they said, "You're going to be ours, but it's going to take some time." So I used to write letters back and forth to my parents, and they would translate it and send it to them. So I have letters that I've written back and forth, and it was such a time of hope because I had prayed to God, one day would you give me a family, a loving family, and God answered my prayer.
Right, right. Oh, that is such a beautiful story just in itself, that little piece of it. And the story just continues on there. Before we keep going, I want to ask a little bit more about the orphanage because you just mentioned you were in the back of the orphanage where the handicapped children were kept. And I didn't remember that part of your story. So I want to know, like, what was it like in the orphanage? What things do you remember? How did you feel? Was your sister able to be back with you back there?
Yes. Um, Even though my sister Marilyn was not disabled, they allowed her to stay with me. So
Okay.
basically, it was three big rooms: one for the girls, and then one for the boys, and we had a common area for eating and that type of thing. We all slept on the floor, literally side by side, on mats, and so we did not interact with other non-disabled children, except for me because I went to school. And that was the only
Okay.
time that actually, when I got my crutches, I could then walk and go to school. But at the school, I was teased every single day. It was really talk about bullying,
Mm.
physically and verbally. Kids made fun of me because in that culture in many parts of the world, still they believe that if you have a disability, that you or your parent has sinned and God is punishing you. So it's
Oh,
okay to make fun of disabled people, and they did that every single day when I went to school. So it was very difficult. And
yeah.
when I came back to where I was staying, then I would take it out on kids there because I got so frustrated. But it was not fun, especially growing with a disability in an orphanage, because kids were constantly picking on you and physically and verbally abusing you.
That's so sad. It really is. And like you said, it's a cultural thing. I think that even happens here in America, probably. I mean, we hear about bullying all the time, but it is not part of our culture, I don't think. And that must have been so difficult. And what else was it like to, I guess, live with the effects of polio as a child? How did you get around?
Well, until I received my crutches, I literally crawled. And there were I remember other boys and girls with polio, and there were kids with CP and other degenerative diseases that it left them unable to walk around, and so we didn't have wheelchairs. So literally, we crawled. My sister would literally pick on my leg like a wheelbarrow, and I would just walk around that way. Later on, I did get some crutches from my sponsor, and so while it was difficult learning how to walk, I fell a lot getting up and walking. And then much later on, I was given a set of leg braces. And so
Okay.
those were very, very uncomfortable. But at least I could then walk around a little bit better, a little bit more stable, so I wouldn't fall as often. But it was challenging. But at least once I got crutches, I could start walking. And even
Mm-hmm.
though I would fall, at least I could walk and get around. So which was amazing thing to experience, especially after crawled around for a good part of your life because you didn't have crutches, and certainly there were no wheelchairs to be had.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask if it felt really freeing in that moment to be able to walk around or
I think the main thing was it enabled me to then go to school, and that I don't know why because it was very challenging.
Mhm.
Kids picked on me all the time, but I still wanted to go to school and learn. And so I
Yeah.
went to school every day, and I was the only handicapped kid in the school with all the other able kids. But I'm so thankful that I did get crutches and was able to walk and go to school.
Yes. Why do you think you wanted to go to school so bad?
I don't know. I think God just put that desire in me because I didn't have parents saying it's important to go to school. I didn't have a mentor that says it's important to go to school. I just wanted to learn, And so when I went to school, I learned how to read and write in Korean. I think when I was in fourth grade, they start teaching a little bit of English. They start teaching you some Chinese writing, and so it was just I just liked learning
Yeah,
and getting information, and I had no idea that was important in the future, but I just wanted to learn, and
that's amazing.
maybe we just get out of the orphanage too, with all the handicapped kids were, because then I was in school. I was with the regular able-bodied children, but I went to school until I was in the fourth grade, while I was in the orphanage.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's certainly in keeping with the rest of your life and all of the successes and striving that you've had. So I think you're probably right. God put it in you and knowing what you would ultimately do in your life. And we're going to dig into that in a little bit because you've done so many things and I'm excited for people to hear that part of your story. But you mentioned also in the book not just as a child, but also as an adult and throughout the rest of your life, that your physical disability did change the way people treat you. Can you just help us understand how you were treated and in what ways you have been treated differently?
When I came to the United States, I didn't at least I went to Anchorage, Alaska, of all places. So I was adopted from Korea to Anchorage, Alaska. And the amazing thing was, kids didn't pick on me. I think they
Mm,
thought I was different. I was the only handicapped child in the regular school, but they didn't pick on me, and which then was really for me was just a great joy. And I had friends, but then again, you're not normal in the sense of being able to run around and do
yeah.
other things. So even though I tried, and I had some friends, but I think the main thing growing up was I had friends, and I was I tried to be friendly to people because then I can make friends, and then I would be liked. So I was more trying to be accepted. So I was
Okay.
outgoing and tried to. It was just amazing difference between Korea and America. So I was just very thankful. But then growing up in high school, I had a lot of friends, but they were platonic girlfriends who were not girlfriend, boyfriend in the sense of going together. So, but then they were nice to me, but I can feel like, well, yes, I'll go out with you just on a, junior prom or whatever, but you're not my boyfriend type of thing. So you felt that separation, and then living with a disability, people sort of stereotype you, and things like if you're in a wheelchair, people don't think you're smart.
Okay.
So even now, I try to walk as much as possible because if you're in a wheelchair, people automatically assume that you're not smart, and they treat you differently.
Mm,
And I travel quite a bit for Map International, and internationally, when I travel, I always try to wear a suit jacket, even though it's uncomfortable. In many places, it's hot, and wearing a suit jacket is not comfortable. But if I do that, then people will say, "Oh, he must be at least smart." Because if I don't, then they'll think, "Oh, he's just an invalid," and
oh,
won't treat you with any respect.
oh, that is really sad, actually. It's surprising to me because as adults, we understand like a physical disability does not affect your mental ability by any way. But yeah, that's just a sad reality that it's like your first impression or something that you're perceived, I guess.
Right, but even in the U.S., I was this is wild number of years ago now, but the store like big box stores is huge. So I would get a wheelchair, and my wife would push me, and it was a furniture. I won't say the name of the store, but it was a very large store, and so my wife was pushing me, and then went to the counter and I asked the person a question. So instead of answering me, this person answers my wife. It's like, well, hey, I'm the one that asked the question. Can you answer me? But they
Yeah.
automatically assume that if you're being pushed in a wheelchair,
Oh,
that something's wrong with you physically and mentally, and people treat you differently.
wow. Yeah, that's really sad. And I'm so sorry that you've had to deal with that your whole life. And I guess it's a good reminder for those of us listening that to be more aware and intentional of how you're showing up around people that do have something different about them, a physical disability or something else that, or just someone from a different culture that speaks a different language. I think sometimes we treat them differently because we think that they can't hear us or understand us or whatever it might be. And I think it's a really great reminder to try to be more aware of that.
But going back to our U.S. history, when Franklin D. Roosevelt was president of the United States, he had polio, and when he spoke, they always got him on his feet and standing up. He never spoke sitting in a wheelchair. They always got him up standing because then people say, "Oh, he's the president, and he needs to lead, and he can't be leading in a wheelchair." So that's why they always got him on his feet and standing because people will believe what he's saying, or on the radio, obviously can't see. So that's why it was so important for him to get him on his feet and standing tall when he spoke. And so that that's just psychologically, people just think that if you're able-bodied standing, then you must be a good leader. But if you're sitting in a wheelchair speaking, they just have a different lens of what you're saying.
Right. As you've gone through your life, and again, we'll talk about like your experiences and the work stuff that you've done and all of that. But as you've progressed higher in your roles, have you seen people in the way they treat you differently? Like, has it improved?
In the U.S., I think they know what my position is. So if I'm the president or CEO of MAP International, or when I was working in corporate America, I was vice president, then the title will say, "Oh, okay, he must be doing okay. Otherwise, he won't be in that role." But if
Yeah.
they don't know me, they still think people are, if you have a wheelchair, they still think you're not as smart. And
Hmm.
so, and particularly traveling internationally, I always wear a suit jacket because then people will treat you like you are at least knowing what you're talking about. Because if you don't, they literally will treat you as invalid. And again, uh, if they present me as when I'm traveling as CEO of MAP International, then people will show me the respect. But if they just see me just on crutches or in a wheelchair, then they'll treat you differently.
Hmm. Wow. How have you dealt with that emotionally? And you don't have to answer this necessarily if you don't want, but what has kept you moving forward with that?
That's a good question, Stephanie. What I try to do in a proactive way is to be outgoing and try to make the initial contact so people feel they don't feel awkward around me. So because they
Hmm.
don't know how to act, and it's not their fault. Our society portrays people with disabilities in a very negative way. You think about it, growing up, right? Captain Hook with the horrible hook. You got Peter Pan. I mean, the guy with the, any evil thing is usually some kind of a disability. So people think, people with disability are portrayed evil. So that doesn't help either. So, you try your best to make other people feel comfortable. But then for me, I just say, you know what? I can't let people hurt my feelings because if I do, I won't do anything. So
Yeah.
sometimes you put up a callous wall, almost like, well, I don't really care what they say, because if I did, I would not do anything. So in the sense of not in a bad way, I just say, you know what, I'm just gonna let it roll off and not worry about it, and
Yeah.
just move forward because it's just like I before the pandemic, I would go swimming, and you go to the pool, and then if I go to some places, you know people are looking at your legs because it's deformed and you're dragging and all that. But I'm not going to let that stop me from not go swimming and staying
Right.
healthy. And
Yes.
so and also it gives opportunity to strike up a conversation.
Hmm.
Little kids will say, "Oh, how come that man has crutches?" And I would say, when I was little, I didn't get my polio shot, and so when you get your polio shot, it might hurt a little bit, but at least you won't get polio when you get older, and just give a chance to talk about, have a conversation that way,
Yeah.
and try to do some educating. But you just have to live your life and can't worry about what other people think about you. Otherwise, you're just so afraid of what others will say that you won't do anything.
Right. And in some ways, it's forced you, like you said, to have more courage and push outside of your boundaries all of the time and put that wall up to a sense of saying, I don't really care, which honestly, like more of us need to probably do and get comfortable doing. We don't live for other people. We live for God and we live for the purpose He's given us, right? But when you're not forced into that, it's easier to sit back and get more comfortable. And so in some ways it sounds as though it's pushed you, and in that way it's been a positive thing to some degree too,
That's
to
right.
help form your character and all of that. So, and to be able to use it as an educational tool and advocate for things that are important is also another positive that has come out of that. Okay, so let's shift into what life was like as you were growing up in the United States. Like, tell us a little bit about your childhood and going to school and just the family life.
Well, I was the only handicapped kid in my family, and then also in my school, Anchorage, Alaska. And I think one of my toughest things my father and mom had to deal with was Anchorage, Alaska. Snow, I would fall, but they would purposely let me get up on my own, not
Mm,
help me up because I would have to do that anyway. So
yeah.
they told me later on, it was really hard. It would be like easier for them to pick me up when I fell, but I would just learn how to get up on myself. And so then you start learning how to do things yourself. So that's important. And then when you can't, then you could ask somebody to help you. But if you can, just figure out how to do that yourself. And
Mm,
that was the same thing going to junior high school and high school. I learned how to drive a car with hand controls. And so that was a great thing because the first time I could, I can't run fast, I can't swim fast, but I can drive fast. So, if
yeah.
I go at the speed limit, right? So that was wonderful. And then just trying to fit in with my friends. And so I really
Yeah.
had a great experience growing up in Anchorage, Alaska. Really didn't feel the prejudice that you would feel in some places, but I didn't feel it. And I wound up going to University of Alaska, then Cornell University, my undergraduate, and then Northwestern for my MBA. So it was just, I was so thankful to be given an opportunity to go to school because that is the game changer. That if you can go to get educated, then you can use your brain instead of your physical body. Because that's why I knew one thing that I had to go to school because I cannot dig ditches or do physical manual labor. That I would have to earn a living using my brain instead of my brawn.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, that was a really smart insight. And I'm sure it was a natural realization for you to want to continue to go to school. And it's really served you well in your life. And I want to mention too, like, I thought it was really interesting. I read in your book that you did cross country skiing and
Yeah.
you were the high school class president. Like you said, really overcame the physical aspect and were able, basically it sounded like, everything that everyone else did, even though you did have that physical.
Some of it was just I enjoyed being with people, like cross country skiing. My dad made me a sled, and sat down with a wheelchair, and then put skis on it, and I just used my arms to pull myself. And so
Yeah.
I would go everywhere, and it was a lot of fun. So I could be together with my family and friends and doing things. I played hockey using the sled. I was a goalie, so it was a lot of fun to go out and be with and enjoy being kids. And so
Yeah.
that's really important. And we're all kids at heart. So I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to do that growing up. And I even up in the University of Alaska, I took a dog mushing 101 class where I actually had, dog mushing 3 dogs on a sled. So I tried to, as much as possible, do things that I was able to do physically. I can't climb Mount McKinley, but, I tried to do as much as I could growing up.
Yes. Again, that thread of just striving to do everything like everyone else and be with everything because, of course, you were just the same Steve, regardless if you had your legs working perfectly or not. And it's really inspiring. I think it's like those really inspiring stories that you hear of people who have just kind of not cared about having, like, you could have sat back and wallowed in this fact, but instead you took life by a storm, if you will, and move forward with it. And so that's really inspiring. Okay, so tell us about your experiences in the corporate world. And I know by reading your book that some of the time it was difficult in many ways. And just kind of give us an overview. You worked at a lot of different companies.
No, I was very fortunate because of where I wanted to go into marketing, and Northwestern had very good marketing school. So I was recruited by some very good companies, Fortune 500 companies, and started working at J&J and the Johnson & Johnson and the Tylenol business and whatnot. And it was really just a great environment to learn and grow. But then the challenging part is this. Now, I know I was the only disabled, handicapped person in this type of role, so, plus being Asian as well. So I had double things I was trying to then break through. I guess the third would have been if I was a woman, it would have been woman, Asian, or woman, Asian, and disabled. But I had two out of the three, so they're not used to that. So they're not used. People are used to who they are. So when I was and some of the things culturally, like you do things socially, you go play basketball, you play golf, and I really can't do that with the colleagues. So then I would try to do other things. I would try to then work out, just doing workouts. I could do that together with them. So I try to fit in where I can. But in certain things, I don't play golf. I can't fit in that way, or play tennis or play basketball. So and that sometimes that's where the things happen socially, and I wasn't able to do that. But I look for things where I could get involved, and things like after work when they get together socially, try to do that. So whenever I can, I try to fit in so I could be part of that group. And I would watch golf tournaments, and not because I want to play it, but at least I can talk about it. Or sports, I don't play it, but I can watch it and I can talk about it with people. So I do that in a way to be able to socialize when I get together with other individuals who are not disabled.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting insight because I hadn't thought about that aspect of it. Because when you think about working in a corporate job, you're using your brain and it's not as physical, right? Outside of probably the international travel and everything that you had to do, which would have probably been very difficult as well. But like you said, culturally, there were these activities that, again, you had to be conscious of to be able to continue to strive and make those connections relationally. But you did it because, I mean, you had a very successful career in the corporate world. And how long were you in the corporate world again?
Well, about 18 years.
Okay.
18 years.
Okay.
So this is a while.
Yes. Yes. And I know it was difficult on your family as well, right? Because you were traveling so much and you moved quite often.
Yes, and that's one of the I say I had about 10 jobs, probably more than that. We probably moved 15 times, but at least I had one wife that stuck by me all those years. So you travel a lot, and it was challenging on my family growing
Yeah.
up, two kids, and then, my wife Suki had to really do a lot of the parenting by herself when I was traveling
Hmm.
on the corporate side. But even when I was joining nonprofit, I ended up traveling a fair amount, and you get so involved with work that you spend a lot of time at work. So that also is challenging, making sure you have the right work-life balance to keep
Yes.
that in check.
Definitely, for sure. And then you mentioned that when you worked in the nonprofit world, you alluded to that. So help us understand that transition. Why did you end up transitioning to working in nonprofits and how did that work?
I never planned on. It was not my goal to go work at a nonprofit. So in the '99, early 2000, the founder of the orphanage where I grew up in passed away. And so I was on the board of Hope for 9 years. And when Bertha Holt passed away, Suki and I flew to Korea to attend her life celebration.
Mhm.
And I met one of my childhood friends. His name is Kyung Soo. He has severe cerebral palsy. And so he was smiling at me. So I thought he must be my friend. So I asked Kyung Soo, "Do you remember me?" And he said, "Yes, Myung Soo. That's my Korean name." So what do you remember me about? He goes, "Well, you used to beat me up all the time."
Oh.
And I felt really bad because I'm really strong upper body. And I had shared with you earlier that when I was only at school in Korea, I was the only handicapped kid, and kids would physically pick on me every single day. So when I came home, where the handicapped kids were all staying, I would literally line them up. I would hit them really hard one at a time, just every day. And this guy could barely feed himself, and he can't defend himself. And I was hitting him because in my frustration. And
Yeah.
I was, I felt really bad about it. And I said, Kyung Soo, would you forgive me for what I did to you growing up? And he looked me right in my eyes. He said, Myung Soo, I forgave you a long time ago because Jesus forgave me of my sins. When he
Mm.
said that, I was speechless. And I started thinking, what am I doing with my life? I'm working to make the companies rich, myself rich. I remember praying to God. I said, God, Lord, show me what you want me to do, and I will do it, anything. And then I learned later that the orphanage I grew up in was initially helped started with initially by Bob Pierce, the World Vision founder. And so then I literally picked up the phone and talked with the senior VP of marketing. And after many interviews, they hired me as VP marketing operations. And that was 2000 in the springtime. So that's how I got into nonprofit.
Wow, what a testimony that your friend, I mean, you can just see the breadcrumbs, right? Like God's plan to bring you to Him and do the work you have done in the last years and are doing today started back in that orphanage. And you were taking out the frustration, which is so understandable and sad in a lot of ways. It makes me sad. But his testimony and your testimony of just having that grace and saying, I forgive you because God forgives me. And I mean, it changed your life. That's incredible.
It
Really
really
incredible.
did. And who would have thought, a childhood friend who has severe cerebral palsy would change the trajectory of my life because I had no plans on working for nonprofit, but God used
Yeah.
him to say, "No, I have other plans for you." And it was a major change because I love working corporate America, doing well, and took a big salary cut, come for
Hmm.
nonprofit, but it's been worth every moment of it because we're doing God's work and helping people in need that is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, so you mentioned you started by working with World Vision. And then can you just share with us a couple of the other organizations you worked with leading up to MAP?
Sure. I've worked at World Vision and then Heifer International, Child Fund International in Richmond, Virginia. And so I was about 9 years, over 9 years ago now, I was at Child Fund and I was COO then, Chief Operating Officer. And I get a call from a recruiter and they said, we have a perfect job for you at CEO of MAP International. And I jokingly said, MAP, who uses MAP? Everybody has GPS. And they said, no, MAP stands for Medical Assistance Program. And we think with your background, you will be perfect for the role. And I told the recruiter, no, no thanks, because I had given the CEO of Child Fund my commitment that I would be there 3 to 5 years. And
Okay.
so I had just been there 2.5 years. So I came home and told Suki about it. And Suki said, that's my wife, Suki. She said, what do you tell them? I said, no. She said, you said they're a Christian organization, MAP. I said, yes. She said, don't you think we should at least pray about it first? And I said, you're right. She's right 99% of the time. So we prayed about it. And then I looked at the 990, which is the tax form that we had filed with the IRS. And they had a lot of gift in kind, but not too much in cash. And I prayed some more. It's going to be another cut in salary. And so I said, oh, no, I'm not ready for this role. And my wife reminded me, I think you are ready for this role. Think about why God allowed you to get polio, why God let you work in corporations, pharmaceutical companies, and nonprofits, at World Vision and Child Fund. And she said, and she was right. God had prepared me for the role. And so I'm really thankful. I listened to Suki. And so about 9 years ago, I joined MAP International as CEO.
Yes.
It's the best
Yes.
decision career wise I made because MAP had such huge impact in lives of people around the world.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's also really incredible too how your experiences actually in those corporate roles and in the nonprofit roles actually prepared you for MAP as if it was part of the grand plan, which it
Yes.
was, but you didn't
Amen.
know that. I mean, having worked with the pharmaceutical companies and then I think there was other things you explained too in the book about the nonprofits, how it just really uniquely positioned you for MAP.
Yes. And, international, World Vision, the international child, sponsorship agency. And then heifer was small scale farming, and then the child fund was, and I was COO, where I oversaw the whole operation except for programs. So I had finance, HR, legal, marketing, all of that reporting to me. So it was kind of getting trained to be the CEO. And, with just every day, I'm reminded what it's like to live because of not having the access to vaccine, polio vaccine
Yes.
when I was younger. And so if you can prevent that, it's so much easier. And then if you do end up getting sick, then you need medicines to help you be healthy.
Right.
And so, people have hypertension, cardiovascular problems, diabetes, asthma problems. You need antibiotics, and MAP is able to provide all those products free of charge to our partners on the ground because MAP works with pharmaceutical companies where they donate it to us before they expire, so we can then get it to people that need it around the world.
Right, exactly. And that is where we're going is MAP International and telling us all about the incredible mission that you serve. And that's like you said, having this polio has been such a reminder for you because I think it's 60 cents was a dose. And if you had gotten a 60-cent dose when you were a child, you wouldn't have this polio. And what it is really, truly quite a reminder as you're advocating for people around the world who don't have access to these life saving medicines. So, explain again, you have what kind of medicines, vaccines, the different parts of your work at MAP.
Well, the way MAP works is that we get pharmaceutical companies that donate medicines. And last year they donated us $750 million. That's the wholesale acquisition cost of prescription medicines, OTCs, and supplies. But most of the value dollar wise is RX medicine. And these are for chronic diseases like hypertension, cardiovascular, diabetes, asthma, and also, we get prenatal vitamins to antibiotics and other life-saving type of medicines and health supplies, face masks, gloves, PPEs, and all that's needed to support the healthcare system. And so before they expire, they donate it to MAP, and then we raise money, and then we work with partners on the ground, who then in turn will get it to hospitals and clinics in 80 countries around the world. And then we also have support doctors who go on medical mission trips, surgical teams that go, and then we provide medicines for them to take with them, sutures that if they do surgical teams, heart valves and catheters and other specialty products like that. And so we are literally impacting millions of people's lives through these medications. And the reason that we have such a long lifespan in this country is that because for the most part we are able to get access to medicines when we are diagnosed with hypertension. Because if you don't treat it, eventually you're going to have kidney problems and other issues, and you're not going to live as long. And that is why it is so exciting and such a privilege to be able to do this work. And it's really literally pennies on the dollar because since the medicines are donated for the most part, $10 that we spend provides $400 worth of medicine. Think about that
Mm,
leverage there. $10
yes.
providing $400 of medicine.
Yes, that's incredible. And you mentioned that you're able to share medicines and supplies and stuff on medical mission teams, all of that. And children also, like you're saying, preventing things like hypertension. But there's also, I know you've mentioned how when children get a very curable disease and they don't have access to something like an antibiotic or something, it can actually kill them. And so this medicine is extremely vital and very cheap for us to for you, I should say, for you to be able to get it in the hands of the kids and families who need it. And it literally is life-saving medicine.
That's right. And the number one killer of babies under the age of 5 is diarrhea. And with diarrhea, you have to stop it. You have to have the antibiotics to treat the root cause, and then you need the oral rehydration salts. Pedialyte is an example to rehydrate them. And then if they have some kind of underlying fever or whatnot, you need Tylenol or ibuprofen or something to help treat
Right.
that child. And so something as simple as that, or it could be cholera, it could be pneumonia. You have to treat those diseases fairly quickly. Otherwise, the child is not strong enough to live. And another example will be 75% of people living in developing countries end up getting worms. So if you don't treat the underlying problem with the worms, and we have this very effective, you take one tablet of albendazole twice a year, you just chew it, drink some water with it, it will kill the worms in your body. So then you can get the benefits of the nutrition that you take in instead of the worms. So things like that. It's so critically important that we provide
Yes.
these type of medicines.
Yes, yes. And I want to highlight too, because I think it is so interesting that these pharmaceutical companies that are donating these medicines and supplies, it's good for them. Like it's a wonderful partnership because it benefits you, it benefits them, and it benefits the end recipient. And the reason why it's good for them, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's good for them because these are medicines that are expiring, but yet have a long enough window that you are able to get it to the person, the people in the country who need it, and they can use it. Otherwise, the pharmaceutical companies can't sell it and they end up having to actually pay to have them incinerated. And of course, I assume that must have an effect on the environment. And there's just this ripple effect. And so it's just really incredible how you're able to make so much good out of something that would otherwise be unused.
Yeah, you really summarized it well, Stephanie. Yes, because they don't donate it to us, and which then really helps them because it help they care about people. Their culture, their social corporate responsibilities. Their employees feel good about it because they're helping people here in the U.S. as well as around the world. And if they did not donate it to us, they would literally have to. They can't take it to the landfill. They have to incinerate it, and that hurts the environment as well. So really
Yes.
is a win-win, and they get a small tax deduction as well. So it's really a win-win, and there's no way the people that we're giving this medicine could afford to buy it. And by the way, they said that up to 40% of medicines that's available in retail in developing countries are counterfeit.
Hmm.
Either they have subpar ingredients or there are not even any ingredients at all. And so they don't even know what they're buying is going to do any good. So the medicines we provide free of charge through these donations from pharmaceutical companies are really valued because they can't even buy it in those countries because oftentimes it's not even available.
Right, right, exactly. I also know that you've expanded your model, if you will, to go beyond just the donations of the pharmaceutical companies, but to actually be able to purchase medicines with donations that other donors are providing, Matt, so that you can reach more people. And can you explain a little bit about that, or is there anything more, I guess, to elaborate on there?
No, there's sometimes we don't get enough medicine donated, like pediatric antibiotics as an example. So now through donations, we will actually purchase through, and we buy pretty large quantity, millions of dollars. So we can then buy it in a much better cost. And because MAP is, we have a foreign trade zone in Brunswick, Georgia, we could actually purchase medicine from Europe, Netherlands, bring it into the U.S., and then combine it with other medicines, then ship it usually in a container to our partners on the ground so then they can distribute it. So it's really a big service. And then, so the purchase that medicine that we purchase, we have to, recover our costs. So our partners will pay a cost plus a little bit of markup to cover our handling charge. But that helps to round out the order. So the gifting kind that's there, not everything can be given by gifting kind. So this really helps us quite a bit to be able to purchase medicines as well.
Right, exactly. It's just amazing that you're able to do that. So, not only do you receive donations from pharmaceutical companies and purchase the medicines to fill in those gaps, but I know that you also do work in America with some medicines and you also respond to disasters and crises. So, can you just give us a little insight into how that works?
Sure, I'll be happy to. In Georgia, believe it or not, there's 1.8 million Georgians who do not have health insurance. So these are the working poor. They are able to go to these safety net clinics, but when the doctor writes a script for hypertension, cardiovascular, whatever the type of medicine, they don't have the money to go to a drugstore and purchase it. So MAP provides free of charge, one bottle at a time, to Georgians through these safety net clinics. As an example, right here in Clarkston, Georgia, next to Decatur, there are 60 people groups in this refugee area, and we actually provide medicine free of charge through that was called ethnic clinic. But we work with Good Sam's nonprofit and other nonprofits in Georgia, as well as other in other states in Southeast United States. So it really is helping to provide not only the healthcare part, but they now walk out their clinic with one bottle of the medicine that they need to keep them healthy.
Yes, I love how you're not only serving around the world internationally, but you are taking a look at what is needed here in the United States, and in particular, in this case, Georgia, and recognizing that there is a need for these medicines here too. So that's really incredible. And now, when you're responding to disasters around the world, why are you able to respond to disasters?
That's a great question because we have partners on the ground and we can respond fairly quickly. And we do wait to hear from our partners that says we need these type of medicines or supplies. And so, we work with over 40 partners that then they are on the ground already in countries like in Ukraine and, in Turkey, Syria, and then in the U.S., obviously, for different types of disasters. So, be it a natural disaster or man-made disaster like the Ukraine war, we get involved relatively quickly in providing whatever that they need sent to them. We do have the disaster health kits. These are personal hygiene kits that are packed by volunteers, and that's another way for people to get involved. And it has things like washcloth, soap, shampoo, first aid kit, toothbrush, toothpaste, and so it gives them some humanity back in a disaster response situation. So we provide that free of charge, by the way, to people that need it through our partners. We do raise money to buy the components, but the actual unit itself is provided free of charge. And that plus other medicine supplies that people need around the world, we are able to quickly respond because our partners on the ground are already there. So we're
Right.
very fortunate to be able to partner with different types of nonprofits. And while we MAP is a Christian organization, we help all people, regardless of ethnicity, gender, or religious belief. So we are driven by Matthew 25:36, when Jesus said, "When I was sick, you looked after me." And we help all people everywhere around the world.
Yes, I love that too, because as a person who believes in God and ascribes to faith, it is so important and it's what drives your work, right? And we're called to love and serve all people. And I love that you don't discriminate in any way and are just able to provide the medicines and supplies to the people that need it when they need it most, whether it's a disaster or something as in like a clinic or something like that. So it's just a really beautiful story, I think, of MAP and who you exist to serve and how you go about doing it. I think it's a very efficient model. I love how you partner so well with partners on the ground, but also with pharmaceutical companies and with donors. I think you do a great job there as well. So it's so incredible to like hear your personal story, and I'm sure those listening today are just really wowed. I think they got a lot of insight in hearing your own experience and background and how you just like push the boundaries and continue to move forward, and how successful you have been in following God's call on your life. And it would be a shame not to mention the person that's right by your side through all of this. I really want to highlight Suki. I've met her a few times, and she is just such a gracious, kind, God-fearing woman, and I admire her so much. And I think the two of you together are such a power couple. And I know that she goes about and really is by your side and helps you do what you do best. So I just really wanted to mention that too.
Well, thank you. And I could not do what I do without Suki. She is my biggest supporter, and literally, she enables me to do what we do together. And
Yeah.
so while I might be in the limelight, she makes possible what we do. And I'm so thankful because she literally gave up her life, her career, her dreams, so she could support me in doing this work together. So thank you for mentioning Suki. She's an answer to my prayer. And that they could read that in my book because of how all that happened. Is another way God truly answered my prayer.
Yes, yes. Wonderful. So wonderful. Are you loving this episode? Come join us in the Love Light Stories Facebook community, where we make this show come to life. My goal is to make this more than a podcast and truly create a space where we can learn and grow alongside one another in community. Here, we can learn alongside each other with curiosity and humility, and ultimately emulate more love and light to all we meet. You'll be the first to know about upcoming coffee chats, in-person events, book studies, and more. It's here where we'll go deeper in discussion around the topics we explore on the show. You'll even have the chance to meet guests from time to time. Go to stephaniemjacobs.com/manifesto to join. You'll receive an instant download of our manifesto with access to the community. Oh, and did I mention it's all free? So what are you waiting for? Come join us. I just can't wait to meet you, lovely. So, Steve, for those listening today that really love what you're doing at MAP and want to know more about the organization or want to find ways that they can support and get involved, what would you direct them to?
Thank you, Stephanie, for inviting your listeners to come get involved. Number one is to come visit our website, map.org, and there's different ways. You can, I'd love to have your listeners pray for us, but also if you feel led, make a donation. Again, $10 provides up to about $400 worth of medicines. If they want to volunteer, they can volunteer in Brunswick or in Atlanta. And actually, the DHKs, disaster health kits, hygiene kits, the components could be sent to a group, and they can pack it and ship it back to MAP. If you're going on a mission trip, please come visit our website. You can order medicine before you go and take it as your personal luggage. And so we invite people to get involved because a little bit of input helps so many people around the world. So, I really want to thank you for what you're doing through your Love Light Stories. And it's just a great way to connect with people. And I really thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Steve. That really means a lot to me. And there's a lot of ways that people can get involved. And I love that you have tangible ways where people can go pack those health kits. They can even take them with them on mission trips, or you can donate. $10 provides $400 worth of medicines. That's an incredible ROI. I mean, that's huge. It's really exciting. I think I'm going to go make a donation myself again.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes. Yes, let's wrap this up. I just want to say thank you again, Steve. And it's really been wonderful to reconnect with you today.
So thank you, Stephanie, for what you're doing for Love Life Stories, and what you're doing is amazing. And I've listened to some of your other podcasts, and people are doing some amazing work to help those in need. And if we all do a little part of what we can do, it will change the world. So thank you very much.
Isn't it neat how we can look back over Steve's life and see how God has directed his path the whole way? I mean, starting out as an orphan stricken with polio at a young age and ending up as president and CEO of MAP International, providing the same life-saving medicines he needed as a young boy. It's such a beautiful story and testament of God's goodness. There's a few things that really stood out to me in this conversation. First, Steve so vulnerably shared how he's been treated as both a child and adult due to the after effects of polio. He shared multiple instances where he's been bullied or discriminated against just because of his paralyzed legs. It saddens me, and it's a reminder to us to notice how we treat people in wheelchairs or those with a disability in general. Secondly, I love how Steve explained MAP's partnerships and how their operating model lends itself to being a win-win for everyone involved. They're able to partner with pharmaceutical companies to receive donated medicines they can no longer sell but are still perfectly good to send to those in need. They can partner with those already on the ground for quicker distribution of needed medicines and supplies. And of course, the end recipient is benefiting dramatically by receiving medicines that often, quite literally, save their lives. As someone who plays an active role in a family foundation, I can say they partner so well with their donors as well. MAP builds long-term relationships with their donors, often engaging them in specific projects of their choosing. It's really incredible. What else stuck out to you? Let us know by going to the show notes and submitting your comments via SpeakPipe or email. And don't forget, you can donate or volunteer too. Simply go to map.org for ways you can get involved, whether it's volunteering to pack disaster health kits, bringing kits with you on medical missions, or donating to provide life-saving medicines worldwide. And remember to grab Steve's book, The Crutch of Success. You'll find it linked in the show notes. And if you haven't joined the Love Light Stories community yet, now is a great time. Join today and you'll be entered to win a copy of the book. Did this episode touch your heart? If you loved today's story and have a relatable experience to share, encouraging words for our guests, or just want to share a comment, go to the show notes for this episode and send us what we like to call heart mail for a chance to have your note featured on an upcoming episode. If there's a large response to any particular story, we might just bring that guest back on the show to dive into your comments, or even have them join us as a guest in the Love Light Stories Facebook community. It's as easy as sending us a voice message or written note, both easily accessible in today's show notes. Simply go to stephaniemjacobs.com and click on the Stories tab. So, give it a try. Send us your heart mail. I just can't wait to hear what's on your heart. And hey, thank you so much for listening to this podcast and leaning into today's story. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't ever miss an episode. And a great way you can support these conversations is to rate the show and leave a review. And if you have a friend who would like these stories, share it with them too. All of these things are the best way you can support this podcast. So thank you. And until next time, lovelies, keep radiating that love and light to everyone you meet.